Hi, this is The Great Expanse. Last video, I started working on my boss rush game, and currently there's only one boss, which doesn't make for a great boss rush. So, we're gonna add another few boss fights and finish up this game right here and right now. Can you believe it's only gonna take 10 minutes to finish this whole project? So, the plan for the second fight is the sludge monster thing. I have no idea what I've made. I just know that I spent way too much time making this awful animation. Look at that big goober in game just flobbing back and forth. It's almost like he won't mercilessly slaughter you hundreds of times. First attack on the docket is the sticky blob projectile, which will launch out at random, sticking to platforms and acting as an obstacle. And it drops and sticks to the ground. Perfect. Oops. I love when stuff like that happens. Amusing, but still easy to fix. And then I got this, which wasn't easy to fix. I had no idea why they were floating above the terrain because the log messages I was getting were telling me that they should have been in the correct position. And apparently, setting the position via the rigid body isn't 100% accurate for some reason, which took me a long time to figure out. So I just changed that and now it works perfectly. So the boss shoots it out and it sticks to any platform it touches. And since the blob is being set as a child, I can move the terrain around and it'll stay in place, which is important because the next mechanic of the fight is a dynamically changing stage. The first part is going to be a poison lake that rises up and down, with the boss floating on top of it. Here's the actual sprite in game. It's not bad. I then went and changed the tutorial to use this texture instead because I like it better than what used to be there. And I wanted a platform that could float on top of the sludge lake, so I made it. There it is as a proof of concept. Time to work on making it an actual concept. Well, before doing that, I'm realizing how wonky these platforms are. They're doing all sorts of things I don't want. The player can push it, and while I want the sludge bombs to be able to stick to it, it pushes the platform all over. So I got it pretty much all working, but now the boss's projectile collides with the liquid, which is really very annoying. I'm trying to keep my collision matrix simple and uncomplicated, but I'm really struggling here. Okay, well, scratch everything I just did. I just set the platforms as a child of the liquid. I don't know why I just didn't do that to begin with. You will not believe the time I wasted doing this. Now I can actually work on something interesting. So, since the boss is pretty stationary, I want to make it somewhat follow the player around. Here's the first attempt. Let's see how it works. That's strange. Its position seems to be getting set back to the start. I didn't think there was anything running that would do that. I'm stupid. I won't elaborate. Here it is working. There might need to be a little bit of tweaking in the future with timings and whatnot, but I won't bother showing that. Also, the liquid was moved in front of the terrain because I think that looks better. I forgot that I was planning on working on the actual arena before the boss movement, but the whole floating platform business distracted me. Here's me doing it now though. Making this actually gave me the idea of the boss following the player upwards in the arena, which gives you less space, making it harder. And I made the platforms more sparse higher up, making it more difficult. So it kind of incentivizes the player to stay low on the ground and not go up super high and snipe the boss. Obviously the lake will travel back downwards, but it'll travel downwards slower than upwards. So the way I decided to do this was that if the player is above the set maximum distance from the lake, it'll rise up, and when the player is below that maximum distance, the lake falls back down. This forces the player to stay near the water level near the boss, unless they want the lake to rise up near the ceiling. Okay, this is all well and good, but now we need an attack with some actual pressure, something that keeps the player moving and dodging. The sludge bombs are okay, but they're only really meant as a secondary obstacle, and by themselves can be very easily cheesed. The actual pressure will come from these bombs, which will fall from the ceiling and create shrapnel bullets upon landing. And there it is working. They won't just fall out of the blue though. The plan is to have a warning sign up here at the top of the screen where they're going to spawn in. I was realizing that the boss bar was getting in the way of the warning objects, and I thought the boss bar kind of took up a lot of space on the top anyway, so I took the opportunity to make it smaller and move it up. I think it looks a little better now. And then I decided to not use the warning object and went with something else instead. Here it is. So these lines, I guess, show you the path the bombs will take before they spawn. I changed the boss movement as well. Instead of a few constant positions that it pops up to, it's instead going to pop up directly underneath the player if the player moved far away enough. And so late into it, I realized that I forgot to make a sprite for the second phase of the fight, so here it is now. And with this, I would say this boss is done. Before I show the whole boss fight though, obligatory boss fight on a massive scale, I had to show it. It's beautiful. Now here's the boss fight. I think this is a little harder than the first one, but not by much. I think it's fun though, and it has some interesting mechanics. It did take me a good few tries to complete this. If you don't know what you're doing, then this is definitely a lot harder though. If you go too high on the stage and get stuck with the liquid high up, you're done for. And moving away from the boss means it's more likely for a stray sludge bomb to hit you. But if you stay close, they get shot right over your head. And if you get stuck in the middle of a barrage of bombs, then you're almost guaranteed to get hit with the gazillion projectiles that are condensed in one small area. Trying to think of more things to say while this finishes. I'm still not adding sound effects. And there is me dying, after beating the boss. Now, before I work on the next boss, I'm going to set up some statistic tracking, like a death count and time taken to beat, to display at the end of the game. I'm also going to create a setting that allows you to display the current time into your playthrough. So when you finish a boss, this UI element pops up, telling you how you did. If you press the start button and play the game all the way through, you get a game completion pop-up, which compiles your total deaths and total time for all the bosses. Literally no one is ever going to see that screen though, because doing all the bosses in one go is difficult, and the next boss is going to be even harder. Speaking of the next boss, I don't know what I want this boss to look like, but I do know I want a more dynamic boss this time. I want it to fly around the stage, similar to how a Terraria boss does, so I have to design the sprite around that. I don't know. I seem to have accidentally created an eldritch horror. It'll work, I guess. Now here it is, floating about. I kinda like it, it's weird. I think its name is gonna be Mammon because I googled demon names and that was a result on the list. And I made all of its attack sprites in advance because I wanted them to fit the theme, which they sorta do. It's like a creepy, gory vibe we've got going on here. First up is these eye floaties. They're pretty much just floating sentries that shoot laser beams. If you couldn't tell, they're a little inspired by the eyeball from Mario 64, which I just learned are apparently called Mr. Eye. So the boss will occasionally shoot them out and they won't despawn, meaning you either have to kill them during the fight or they'll build up over time, becoming harder and harder to dodge their collective attacks. And now Mammon shoots the eyeballs out into the world. Isn't childbirth beautiful? For the first time, I'm adding some defense with these bone shields that spawn around Mammon. You can either hit them to destroy them or just aim around them. And then, in the second phase, shields are spawned all around Mammon, forcing you to break in order to deal more damage. I think this adds more complexity as to how to avoid attacks while also placing yourself in a position to attack Mammon. Also, I just think the boss looks cooler with those bones orbiting him. The next attack is this scythe. Getting too close to Mammon may trigger this sweeping scythe attack, which serves the purpose of pushing the player further away. And in the second phase, 3 scythes are used instead of 2. This was fairly straightforward, so there's not really much to say. Now on to movement. This is going to be a little more complicated than the other 2 bosses, but here's the plan. Normally, Mammon will never move towards the player, but when the player moves away, it'll follow, in a circular sort of way. Right now, I don't know what that means either. I was going to make Mammon dash at the player, but decided against it because I thought it might be too unfair and hard to dodge. So here's the basic movement. It stays within a certain range of the player and loops around on the player to make moving away a little more tricky. It's moving very closely in this clip so you can actually see it, but normally it'll be moving around off screen in a larger ellipse. Once again, I'm going to work on the boss arena. This time, there's no terrain, it's just a bunch of floating platforms with a border of purple stuff, because I want this to have a more open feeling. Once again, we're leaving the most important attack for last. Mammon's main attack is this flurry of projectiles. They're supposed to be globs of coagulated blood, but they really just look like red bullets or something. They're small, I didn't have much to work with. Mammon cycles between a few different types of shots. This repeated buckshot aimed directly at the player, these short sweeps of blood shots, this cross sweep attack, this circular spread attack, this spiral of projectiles, and this trap attack, which locks the player inside a certain area. The boss will cycle between these attacks in a predetermined order, so that players can actually learn the patterns to make it more fair. The spiral and trap attack only appear in the second phase of the fight, however. So I started playtesting and realized two things. One, I need to telegraph before Mammon shoots the blood shots, because staying close is basically a death sentence, and I don't want it to be. Because even though you can memorize the order of the attack patterns, you don't really know when they'll come out, so it forces you to stay far away, which I don't want. So I just added a noticeable shake right before it starts shooting. I think most people will pick up on what that shaking means. I was gonna do something more interesting to telegraph, but, no. Two, I honestly think the fight would be better if I removed the death barriers around the stage, so you can fly as far away from the platforms and fight the boss in an open space. Doing that, the fight is done. And here it is. I did intend for this boss to move around more, but it kinda didn't end up happening because I had a different idea. If you're a giant nerd, then you might have picked up on the fact that this boss's design is inspired by Ramiel, who is from a show I won't mention. In the show, Ramiel is basically stationary and just attacks from a distance, and it didn't seem fitting for this design to dash and move all over the stage. If I ever add more to this game, I definitely will add a boss that moves around and rushes at the player. Okay, this boss fight takes a while. I'm gonna speed it up a bit and we can skip to the end. There I am beating it. You know, I said the last boss took a while to beat, but what I meant was like 15 to 20 tries. It wasn't actually that bad. But this took me 40 minutes of playing to beat. And then once again, I died after beating the boss. You can't make this up. I'm changing it so all the eyeballs despawn after the boss dies, but I'm not rebeating this. You might be wondering what this game is going to be called. I procrastinated on it, the same way I did with Cavern Clinger. I went 80% through the development of Cavern Clinger without any sort of name, and I did the same thing here. So, without further ado, this game is going to be called Titan Marauder. Because, you know. And with that, this game is completed. There's always room to add more bosses and expand the game, but it kind of takes a while to create a completely new boss from scratch. So, for now, I'm done. It's up on my itch page, so if you want to challenge yourself, you can play it for free in your browser. I do want to say once again, this game is hard. Even though it's just 3 levels, it just drops you into them, and they're very difficult. I had one person I know try it out, and he couldn't beat any of the 3 levels, but he did get close to beating the second one. However, you don't have to play the bosses in order. The game lets you fight any further bosses even if you haven't beaten the previous one, because there's no save system, but doing so is kind of cheating. You're not really beating the game if you don't do it from the beginning. Plus, there's a special screen that only appears if you beat all the bosses in sequence from the start button. I really want to hear if anyone does beat this, so let me know in the comments if you beat any bosses, or the entire game. Let me know your time and deaths as well so I can sort of gauge difficulty, and just because I'm really curious. Or just let me know if you absolutely suck and couldn't beat anything. So yeah, go play it. Link in the description. Speaking of games you should play, my game Cavern Clinger is free to download and play on both the iOS App Store and Google Play Store. Just so you know. Well, that's everything for this high-quality YouTube video. I'm sure you absolutely loved it. I would love to see suggestions for games you'd want me to make in the future, so let me know in the comments if you have any ideas. Stay tuned for the next masterpiece in video form. See you next time. Bye-bye.